Uncle Jesse here. This is the Bambu Lab X1 Carbon, and today we're going to be doing an initial review of this crazy fast 3D printer. So if you're not familiar with Bambu Lab or the X1 3D printer, this is a brand new machine that just recently launched over on Kickstarter, I think at the end of May, and then the campaign ended sometime towards the end of June. But they've also had a crazy goal in mind of being able to actually ship out the production units starting in July and in August to the backers of the campaign. And I am amazed that mine actually arrived here in the month of August from backing that campaign. And if you didn't see my previous video where I had access to a beta unit that they sent out to me, I was having non-stop issues with that machine. My video was like an hour long of me detailing all of the print failures and just the general issues that I was having with the machine. And I'm so happy to say that the machine that I ended up receiving from the actual Kickstarter campaign that I backed, it works so much better than that machine that I previously received. Also, my previous beta machine that I had access to, I ended up sending that back to Bambu Lab shortly after I made my almost hour-long video so that they could try to diagnose to see exactly what was wrong with my previous beta machine. Unfortunately, FedEx lost it for like a month and a half. It ended up back at my house. I then resent it to Bambu Lab, in which case they actually received it, but it was so badly damaged from the transit and handling of FedEx that they weren't able to really do much investigation other than seeing that it was just crazy bad damaged from the actual shipping. The version that I purchased is the X1 Carbon. I did not buy the combination option, which comes with the AMS system, which is their multicolor management system. I honestly just don't do a whole lot of multicolor printing, and I was running into so many issues when trying to use that previously that I decided I'm not even gonna bother trying to back that, and I just went with this unit. However, at the last minute before the campaign ended, I saw that people were canceling their orders, so I decided to back a second machine that has the actual AMS unit on it as well. I know, a little crazy, but that hasn't arrived just yet. I'm hopefully going to be receiving that here in the next handful of weeks, month here, hopefully before the end of September, and I'll be doing another follow-up video on that multi-material color system there that works with this printer. The X1 Carbon retails for $1,200, and via the Kickstarter campaign, I was able to get it for $850 thanks to their early bird special that they had there. So I saved a few $100s on backing it via their Kickstarter campaign versus being able to pre-order it now, which by the way, they have over on their website the option for you to pre-order purchase these. So once they're done fulfilling all of the Kickstarter campaign orders, they're gonna be starting to produce and ship out the other backed units there via their website. And the really big thing that sets this printer apart from, aside from almost every other machine on the market that you can just buy directly off the shelf, is the speed and quality of the prints that you're able to get off of this machine. This printer prints so insanely fast compared to any other 3D printer that I own. No mods needed. It just comes directly out of the box. You're able to set it up and start printing, which by the way, the unboxing experience is relatively straightforward and smooth. I did do a live stream unboxing of this where it was pretty laughable to see me try and remove, I think it's like 4 screws are the only thing you have to remove from the 3D printer in order to get it up and running. And I was struggling, absolutely struggling getting those screws out of the machine. But once those screws are removed, that's literally all of the installation other than attaching the screen here that you have to do. You plug it in and you can basically start 3D printing. It's really that simple. The build volume for the machine is 256 by 256 by 256, which is a pretty decent mid-size build volume for an FDM 3D printer. It's got a really nice touchscreen interface that works really well. It's very responsive. Overall, there are a few tweaks that I'll talk about here that I would like to see, but overall this works extremely well and not a whole heck of a lot has changed since the beta unit that I received and was playing around with previously. It also has Wi-Fi capability baked into it, so when you go to slice your 3D print using their proprietary slicer called Bamboo Slicer, which is based off of Prusa Slicer, you're able to wirelessly send your print jobs directly to the printer. The X1 series of printers are also fully enclosed, so you have a door that's going to swing open. There's also a glass panel on the top that you can open up if you need to get access from the top down to do any sort of maintenance or anything like that. There is an LED light on the inside to help light up your printer as it's printing because there is a camera built into this machine so that you can wirelessly monitor your 3D prints via a mobile app or over on your desktop app via Bamboo Slicer. Now there is a bunch of custom made components with this machine that's going to differentiate it from most 3D printers that you previously worked with. It does have a direct drive system baked into it, so it's going to allow you to print with pretty much any material that you need to print with. It also heats up to crazy temperatures insanely fast. It'll go up to 250 degrees in just seconds compared to minutes that it might take some other printers to heat up. There's also a custom all metal hot end as well. It comes with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle on here. You're not able to swap these out with just your standard nozzle sets. You are gonna have to order those custom from Bambu Lab if you wanna swap those out to like a 0.6 or a 0.8, or if you want to just in general replace your 0.4 with another 0.4. It's also sporting a heated bed and a magnetic flex plate here that's dual sided. So on one side, you're going to be printing with things like PLA and PETG, and on the other side, you're going to be printing with things like TPU or other materials. And the printer does come with a glue stick, which they recommend for helping promote release of your 3D prints from this build plate. However, I only used that on the very first print, which was a 17-minute benchy. I do not like working with glue sticks, so I decided to try and use Aquanet hairspray, and I have to say that works fantastic for this 3D printer. And the bed, obviously don't spray it directly inside the machine, spray it outside the machine and then place it in there and you can just run off and print with it. The printer is also smart because it has a LiDAR camera-like system baked into it. So as it's doing its first layers, it's going to check your 3D print to make sure that everything is laying down properly. It'll even do some flow calibration tests if you enable those when you first start your 3D print to make sure that everything's oozing out at the proper speeds and degrees when you're running off your 3D prints. And I also mentioned that there was a camera baked in there, which will also record time lapses for you. So you don't need to set up Octoprint or anything complicated like that. You literally just tell your sliced file if you want to run a time lapse or not, and it'll capture the time lapse for you. And it actually looks pretty dang good. Oh, it also has auto bed leveling. I think I forgot to mention that, but it has auto bed leveling. So there's no knobs or anything like that you have to deal with. Again, literally I slice a file, send it to the machine, and it just prints. It's kind of like magic. And again, I didn't back the unit that has the multi-material system sitting on the top, which would normally you'd load your filament in and it feed it through the back. Instead, you have to spin this thing around, and there's a spool holder on the back of the printer, which is, I think, the one really bad design about this machine is the spool holder on the back, but there's easy enough solves for that by just printing spool holders that you can have sitting off to the side or on the top to feed in directly back here. And honestly, as I've been working with this printer for the last 2 weeks, I have just been using that back mounted spool holder, and it's not too bad, but it is still a pain to have to reach back behind the printer, find the spool where it needs to go, and then try to feed it into the tube in the back. It's not the smoothest process there. So let's talk about some of the prints that I've gotten off the X1 Carbon. The first thing I went off and printed was the 17-minute benchy. Come on now, I think that's what everybody runs off and prints. I ended up using my own. This is a sparkly bluish rainbow type filament, and the results, it was super clean. Very, very impressed with how quickly this printed and the results that I was seeing. The next thing I printed was something that I think is almost mandatory that you run off and print if you end up buying one of these machines, which is a garbage can type system that goes on the back of the unit. So as it's spitting out filament from the back, it's not piling up on the floor or on a shelf. You have a little garbage can that this can shoot into. This was off of Printables. I think it was like a 3 to 5 hour print job at 0.28 millimeter layer height. By the way, this printer in their bamboo slicer has tons of default profile options, and so far almost all of them have been amazing. The print results that I've seen, the only thing that I ended up having to tweak was the tree support settings, which I ended up adjusting those to like 0.4 for 2 of the values. I'll have those up on screen here. I then ended up printing a little flexible articulating stormtrooper from Creature Crate, and here you'll notice one of the first issues that I have with this machine, which is the top surface layer quality on curved surfaces just really isn't that great, which I think could be refined significantly via the slicer, and I'll talk about that here throughout some of these other prints, which, by the way, during this print job, I ended up seeing one of the other issues that I have with this machine is randomly it won't display the actual print job information after it completes its print job. So I have no idea how long this took to print. I think it was like a 2 to 3 hour print, if I had to take a guess. I also wanted to see how this would do with a lot of the little parts that I print for different Etsy orders. So I ran off and did a handful of different jobs using this black filament, and it printed so nice and in like a fraction of the time that it takes me to print on most of my other 3D printers. So crazy impressed with the print quality that I'm seeing on these, specifically because I actually print and sell a good number of these and need them to print pretty specifically, and the quality of these look so fantastic compared to what I'm getting off of my other machines. And again, it's printing in like a fraction of the time. The other really cool thing that this printer can do is automatically record time lapses for you for your prints, and it doesn't add on that much more to your print time. So here is a skull that I printed from Hex 3D, and it turned out so good. And what's crazy is I ended up printing a little tower. They recommend that you print a time lapse tower that you can enable along with your print. However, I ended up finding out, thanks to the Bambu Lab Discord and some other users there, that you don't even need to print with this. So from there on out, when I recorded time lapses, I stopped using these little towers there, and everything printed just fine, and I saved some filament and some print time. One other small thing here that we're gonna see more and more of is the top quality issues with ringing along the top of those curved surfaces here, like we're seeing on this skull. I also wanted to print something really big, so I took oh my gosh, there's so many parts in here. These are all a bunch of different parts from Yosh Studios' Darth Vader Samurai helmet that thankfully was already pre-sliced. Well, for the most part, I ended up having to cut a few pieces to fit on the build plate here. I do need to get this all assembled, so hopefully I can have a little overlay here that'll show it actually fully assembled. But again, I am crazy impressed with the print quality that I'm seeing off of this machine. Most of all of this was printed at 0.2 or 0.28 millimeter layer height. And in some areas you can really see where that transition takes place, and I'm hoping with either some setting tweaks within the slicer or just improvements to the algorithm of the slicer and how it generates the G-code, some of those layer lines can be improved. Now here's where things get really crazy. I went off and found out that I could print a full-size helmet. Well, it's kind of like a half helmet from the boys. This is Soldier Boy's helmet from Yosh Studios, all in one piece here on the X1 Carbon. I'm amazed that I was able to get this to fit on the build plate, and I'm actually able to wear the helmet. I honestly can't believe how well and how quickly this printed. I would have never imagined that I would be able to print this in less than 10 hours on an FDM 3D printer. Just crazy. So I decided to run it back again with another helmet, and this time from NikoIndustries. This is his Daredevil cowl. This thing is able to print cowls like this, like perfectly. These small types of helmets that don't need a huge bed, that are gonna be very narrow. I have a 23-inch around head, typically, or 23.5. And this was able to fit just fine on the machine. And I think there was even a little bit more room where I could have scaled this up even further. This honestly gets me so excited about 3D printing things. And one of the biggest struggles that I have with this machine is just having things sliced and ready to go to print on it without it idly sitting by. And one other item that I print a lot of is Loki crowns. And I've printed a lot of Loki crowns off this 3D printer. A lot of Loki crowns. I've done a bunch of different variations, trying print orientations and different settings to see if I could get the best quality doing certain orientations or arrangements of the actual 3D printed files on the machine. The print quality that I'm seeing off of pretty much everything that I've printed so far is in good enough condition and quality that I'd be more than happy to publish these online and sell them to people. And just as an example, these Loki crowns typically take me between 10 to 12 hours to print on an Ender style 3D printer at 0.2 millimeter layer height. Here on the X1 Carbon, on average, it's like 3 hours. And if I take one of the Loki crowns that I printed over on my Elegoo Neptune 2S, which has a crazy dialed in profile specifically for these crowns, and I compare it to one of the prints off of my Bambu Lab X1 Carbon, I think the Neptune 2S print looks slightly better than the print that I'm getting off of the X1 Carbon. However, the print time comparison is drastic, and I mean really drastic. And again, the print quality is good coming off of the X1 Carbon. I think I just need to further work at refining and dialing in the profile settings, specifically for this filament and for this print file. And to be fair, I've had like a year plus of dialing in those settings on my Neptune 2S. And even though the X1 Carbon prints extremely fast and the print quality off of the machine has been incredible for the most part, there are still some things that I'd like to see tweaked with this printer. One of the biggest ones for me personally is the ability for me to wirelessly send and store my sliced files here on the internal storage, whether it's a micro SD card or the actual storage inside the printer. I don't want to have to continuously re-slice my print jobs and send it to the machine, or get up and have to take those out and process them on the SD card. Yes, I know that's kind of lazy, but it's still important to me that you be able to actually do that, especially if for someone like myself who's looking to use these for production type purposes of running multiple print jobs over and over and over again. I need to be able to have those files easily accessible when I need them. This printer also has the ability to unload your filament when you're not printing, which is a no-brainer. However, there's no load filament command in here. So if you want to actually load your filament in, you have to set a temperature and then extrude a little bit of filament every time. You have to keep tap, 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 tapping. And it's a little annoying and not the biggest issue in the world, but it's something that I'm hoping will be updated with a firmware tweak in the future. And speaking of, one thing that I absolutely think should be updated on this machine is if you're mid-print and you need to actually change your filament, the unload function is locked. I don't know why that's the case. So if I pause my print and I need to swap my filament, there's no way to do that other, again, to changing the temperature and heating it up and then extruding it back out, putting a new filament in and extruding it back in. It's just missing the whole unload load functionality that should be there. I also mentioned that this printer does have an internal camera and LiDAR-like system there where it's going to be monitoring your prints. However, it doesn't work well most of the time, at least for me. It will detect and warn me that there's a potential spaghetti issue with my print when there's not one. However, when there actually is a print failure, it doesn't detect it at all, which is kind of odd to me. So I'm hoping they can refine that and dial that functionality in. You'll also occasionally see error messages pop up on the touchscreen interface here, which will prompt you with a QR code. If you scan that QR code, and it takes you to their website or a wiki or something like that, but there's no information about any of the messages or QR codes that I've seen so far. Which, by the way, if you're looking for support or feedback or troubleshooting, the best places that I've found is the Bambulab Facebook group and the Bambulab Discord, which has worked so far fantastic for me of getting feedback from different users and helping answer questions that I could. However, I do think it's going to be some time before they actually get all of their troubleshooting guides up and running on their own site. One other really small nitpicky one that I just want to make sure that you're aware of is you're going to end up with lots of filament bits in the bottom of the machine, and there's no easy way to get those out, so you might want to consider a small vacuum cleaner to get those out of there. I actually considered boring a hole in the bottom so I could dump them out and get all the loose filament pieces out, but a little mini vacuum is probably the best bet. I also ran into some really odd issues where I wasn't able to reprint the last job over again. It was throwing errors on me, so I had to reboot the machine, and that ended up solving the issue. So I don't know if it's like a memory leak or something like that on the 3D printer, but it was a very odd one that I've seen occur multiple times now. And easily the biggest issue that I have with the machine is the top layer quality that I'm seeing on most of the prints that have a curved type surface. And again, I went through the process of running multiple different sets of tests across different slicers to see the different results. And I honestly think it's probably just a matter of refining the slicer or those out-of-the-box profiles within the slicer to allow them to print better on those top layers. And there is an adaptive layer height setting that you can enable, which definitely improves the top surface quality. However, I'd still like to see some improvements made to those default settings. But I have been having an absolute blast printing with this 3D printer, and probably my biggest issue is that it prints so fast that I can't leave it here in the studio. I have to bring it home with me so that I can continually keep running 3D prints on this. It finishes so much faster than my other 3D printers that I typically print with, by like significantly saving lots of hours on a lot of the print jobs. And the print quality, again, is just outstanding for a machine that can print this fast. If you have the funds and are looking for an amazing 3D printer, I would highly, highly, highly recommend the X1 Carbon. I honestly think this is like a jump start in the 3D printing industry for this type of machine, and it's gonna hopefully invigorate a lot of the other manufacturers out there to try and produce faster, more reliable machines that can print like this. It's just honestly an amazing machine, and I'm so excited to get access to the other second unit that I backed, that again I'll be using and making some additional videos once I receive that, with the multi-color system. Again, if you have the funds, I would highly recommend picking up one of these machines. It's been the most fun that I've had with 3D printing in quite some time. Also, Bambulab, if we could get a 300 by 300 by 300 size build volume of a 3D printer, or even larger than that, would be amazing, so that I could run off and print some really big cosplay helmets on this thing. I did also want to take a minute to say thank you to all my Patreon supporters for your continued support. Hopefully at some point here, I might end up with some more dialed in settings here for the X1 Carbon that I'll more than likely be sharing with my Patreon supporters. So if you're interested in more information on that, you can find links to it down below. And let me know down below if you're considering getting an X1 Carbon for yourself. Again, I'm honestly just loving this machine so far. I'll be doing another follow-up on this after I've had a chance to work with more materials and just had more hands-on experience with it in probably another month or so. But hey, I just want to say thanks again for watching, you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.